April 1945. A cold wind drifts across a stretch of open ground just beyond a recently liberated concentration camp in Germany. The earth is uneven, freshly disturbed in places, hardened in others. Boots sink slightly with each step. The air carries a smell that no one present will ever forget. Not just death, but something heavier, sweeter, final. Bodies lie scattered across the field. Some are half buried, others are stacked, limbs twisted, faces hollow. The result of hurried concealment or abandonment. American soldiers stand nearby, silent. Some stare, others look away. A few clench their fists so tightly their knuckles turn pale beneath the dirt. Across from them stands a group of captured German officers. Their uniforms are still intact, pressed, medals pinned neatly across their chests. They look like men from another world, one untouched by what lies at their feet. One of them turns his head sharply, as if refusing to breathe the same air. "I will not do this," he says under his breath. An American officer steps forward. "You will." The German shakes his head, more firmly now. "We are officers. This is not our task." There is a pause, then another voice enters. Calm, controlled, impossible to ignore. "No," it says. "Today it is." Heads turn. General Dwight D. Eisenhower has arrived. He does not speak immediately. His eyes move across the field, taking in every detail. The bodies, the shallow graves, the men standing beside them, pretending distance. Then he looks at the officers. And finally, he looks back at the dead. What he is about to decide will not just determine how these bodies are buried, it will determine who is forced to carry the weight of them. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe. We tell the World War II stories that force you to confront the hardest moral decisions in history. New videos every week. To understand what is happening in this moment, you need to understand what Allied forces were discovering in the final months of World War II. As Nazi Germany began to collapse in early 1945, Allied troops pushed deeper into its territory. What they found behind barbed wire and guarded gates was not simply evidence of cruelty, but systems. Organized, efficient, and designed for one purpose: death. Entire camps filled with emaciated survivors barely clinging to life. Mass graves, crematoria, the records detailing numbers that seemed impossible to comprehend. Many soldiers had heard rumors. Stories passed along in whispers, reports that sounded exaggerated, even unbelievable, until they saw it, until they walked through it, until they smelled it. Commanders quickly realized something else just as important as the discovery itself. The world might not believe this. Photographs could be dismissed, reports could be challenged, words could be denied. But witnesses, especially German witnesses, would be harder to ignore. General Dwight D. Eisenhower understood this immediately. He was not just thinking about the war's end. He was thinking about what came after. He began ordering journalists, members of Congress, and civilians to visit the camps, to see them firsthand, to remove any space for denial. But even that was not enough. Because there were still men, educated, disciplined, authoritative, who stood in front of the evidence and claimed ignorance, who said, "We did not know." Eisenhower realized that seeing alone was not forcing acknowledgement. Something more direct was required. General Dwight D. Eisenhower was 54 years old at the time. He had grown up in Abilene, Kansas, a man known for restraint, for control, for his ability to manage not just armies, but personalities. He had coordinated one of the largest military operations in history with a steady hand. He believed in structure, in hierarchy, in the idea that systems, when properly guided, could function with precision. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for this. What unsettled him most was not just the scale of the horror, it was the response to it. Men of rank, standing before undeniable evidence and choosing distance. Not denial in the sense of argument, but denial in the form of separation. That is not mine. That was what disturbed him, because if that separation held, then responsibility dissolved. And if responsibility dissolved, then this could happen again. Among the captured officers stood Colonel Karl Weissmann, a career officer in the German Wehrmacht. He was not a fanatic, not a shouting ideologue. He was something more difficult to confront. Reasonable, educated, disciplined, decorated for his service. Weissmann believed in order, in rank, in the structure that separated military duty from political action. To him, the camps belonged to the SS, not the army, not him. When he looked at the bodies, he did not react with visible horror. He reacted with a kind of restrained irritation, as though he had been placed in a situation that did not concern him. "This is not our responsibility," he said when addressed. "This is SS work." His voice carried certainty. When ordered to assist in burying the dead, he refused without hesitation. "We are officers of the German army," he said. "We do not perform labor tasks, especially not this." It was not cruelty in his tone. It was conviction. He believed he was maintaining principle. To him, being forced into this work was not justice. It was humiliation, and he would not accept it. Eisenhower listened. Around them, American soldiers stood in silence. Though their tension was visible in the set of their shoulders, in the way their hands hovered near clenched, the bodies remained where they were, exposed, unburied. Eon acknowledged. Eisenhower understood the moment was larger than the immediate task. This was not just about burial, it was about responsibility. If these officers walked away, they would walk away intact, their narrative preserved. We did not know. But if they were forced to act, to touch the consequences, that distance would collapse. And yet there was another side. Forcing them could be seen as something else. Not justice, not accountability, but degradation. Where was the line? Eisenhower looked from the officers to the bodies, from the living to the dead. He had to choose. The first pressure came from his own men. One soldier stepped forward, unable to remain silent. "Sir," he said, voice tight, "they should see all of it." Another added, "To make them walk through every part." These were not requests for punishment. They were demands for acknowledgement. The soldiers had seen too much to accept indifference. Eisenhower recognized that this decision would not only affect the officers, it would affect his men. They needed something resolved here, something answered. Then came the civilians. Local German residents were brought in, men, women, even teenagers. They stood at the edge of the field, eyes wide, expressions shifting between shock, denial, and something harder to define. "We didn't know," one said. Another repeated it. "We didn't know." Eisenhower ordered them to walk through the site, to look. Some cried, some covered their faces, others looked, and then quickly looked away. But a few remained still, detached. The repetition of the same claim, "We didn't know," began to hollow out its own meaning. If everyone claimed ignorance, then who was responsible? And if no one was responsible, then what was this? The tension tightened further when Weissmann spoke again. "This is beneath us," he said louder now. Another officer nodded in agreement. "This is not justice. This is revenge." The words landed differently, because now the argument was not denial, it was reframing, turning the act of accountability into an accusation. If Eisenhower forced them, he risked confirming their claim. If he did nothing, he reinforced their distance. The bodies remained, waiting. Eisenhower stepped forward. The murmurs stopped. His voice when he spoke was controlled, measured. "You say this is not your responsibility," he began. Weissman met his gaze. "It is not." Eisenhower gestured toward the field. "Those people did not ask which branch of service was responsible," he said. Silence followed. "You are officers of a nation that allowed this," Eisenhower continued. "That made it possible." "We followed orders," Weissman replied. Eisenhower nodded slightly. "And now," he said, "you will follow mine." A pause settled over the group. Then the decision, delivered without force, but without room for argument: "You will bury them." Weissman's expression hardened. "This is beneath us." Eisenhower took a step closer. "No," he said quietly. "What's beneath you is them." The words carried no anger, only finality. The order stood. Tools were brought, shovels at first. Some officers hesitated, when standing motionless as if the command might dissolve if ignored long enough. It did not. They were made to begin. Reluctantly, stiffly, they moved. But hesitation lingered. So did resistance. Eventually, tools were no longer enough. Hands touched earth, uniforms stained, medals hung over dirt and sweat. Weissman stood still longer than the others, watching, calculating. Then slowly he bent down. His knees pressed into the ground. His hands followed, the same ground that had covered the dead. Around him, American soldiers did not speak. There was no celebration, no visible satisfaction, only silence. Bodies were lifted, carried, placed into graves with more care than they had been given in death. The process was slow, deliberate, hour after hour, then day after day. By the end, the field had changed, not cleansed, not erased, but acknowledged. One soldier would later recall the silence that followed. "No one said anything," he remembered. "Not on the walk back, not among the prisoners, not even among the officers." Something had shifted, but it did not announce itself. Weissman no longer argued. He did not repeat his earlier claims. He walked differently, slower. His eyes no longer scanned outward. They stayed down. Another soldier noticed something else. The officers stopped turning away from the smell. They stopped avoiding it. They stood in it. For the first time, they did not separate themselves from it. Years later, historians would debate Eisenhower's decision. Some argued it was necessary, and that forcing German officers to confront the consequences of the system they served created a form of accountability that no courtroom could replicate. Others disagreed. They argued that it blurred the line between justice and collective punishment, that not every officer present had direct involvement in the camps, that forcing them into labor risked becoming symbolic vengeance rather than lawful responsibility. But defenders countered with a different argument. The camps did not exist in isolation. They were part of a system sustained by compliance, by silence, by the willingness to look away. And in such a system, distance becomes its own form of participation. Eisenhower's decision remains difficult to categorize, not because it was unclear, but because it refused to fit into a simple definition of right or wrong. Either if you had been in Eisenhower's position, would you have forced the officers to bury the victims, or allowed them to walk away and face judgment later? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more World War II stories that challenge what you think you would do, make sure to subscribe. Next, a German general begged for mercy during his trial, but before the judge responded, he ordered one survivor to speak first.